It's always a great time to drop colored gems on top of other colored gems in columns for the Sega Game Gear, assuming you have a lot of batteries. Hey there, kids! This is the review of columns for the Sega Game Gear. Did you know that if you accidentally make a typo when creating the title cards for the columns video game review here on Classic Game Room, it looks like this. Columns for the Game Ear. I hear it's good. Was that a typo, or is it a future Sega game console? Who can say? Anyway, odds are if you're watching Classic Game Room, you've probably played columns on something. I think the Sega Genesis version may be the best known, but did you know this is also an arcade game? Really? Who would choose columns over Pac-Man? It makes a nice portable game, which is why it's fun to review this on the Sega Game Gear. This is a 1991 release for the Game Gear, which has a single-player mode, as you can see, versus mode if you have two Game Gears and whatever cable is required, as well as a flash mode that I'll show you later. And yes, I'm terrible at all of them. I'm horrible at puzzle games. I lose quickly, miss the most obvious color combinations, and eventually just go back to Cosmic Carnage. But if you like puzzle games such as Tetris, well, there's columns, like the Sega version of Tetris, except instead of piling up a bunch of shapes, you're lining up colored jewels to score big points. You can score vertically, horizontally, diagonally, and combos give you the biggest points, but you actually have to think ahead and use your brain to do that. A brain. I hear I have one somewhere. I've never seen it, though. Oh yeah, you know I planned all that way in advance. While puzzle games never make for the most exciting visual reviews, Columns on the Game Gear is columns on the Game Gear. It's an excellent platform for columns, and plays like columns. Except it's on the Game Gear. I also have a version of this for the Sega Saturn, but this one is on the Game Gear. And I have to thank Spencer from Redwood City, California, for sending it to the show to be played on the Game Gear. If you can stay alive long enough, the game gets really fast and you score big points, but at some point it just makes me feel stupid. By level 2, usually. This is the vitamin C enriched version of columns with fruit. If gems get boring, you can make them fruit. Or just colored blocks. And you can change the music. Columns gives you a few options to make columns a little bit more column-tastic, but this game does lack that certain special burning people with monsters and cutting them in half-itude. Because you're stacking colored gems and making them fall over on said people and crushing them before they're burned and cut in half. Or so I'm told. This is the flash mode where I think you're supposed to dig down through the columns and get to that flashing one, except I think you have to actually be good at the game to do that. So I'm not. Let's just go back to the standard mode. The fact is, Columns plays pretty well on the Game Gear. It's a puzzle game, so there's not a lot of motion. It's relatively easy on the eyes and the ears. It's Columns on the Game Gear. With color, something Tetris didn't give you back in the day with its pathetic black and white. Although Tetris is still fun in black and white, I'm just pointing out this has color. And look at these things. They're like Skittles, if Skittles looked like that. We should all hold hands. That was a Connect 4 moment right there. So a big thanks to Spencer. Once again, this is Columns. Not for the Genesis, not for the Bandai WonderSwan, or the Game Boy. It's Columns for the Game Gear.